All right, second problem. I love you, Christy. Let's see. So you start off with the polynomial here, x cubed minus 3x squared plus 2 equals 0. And one of the solutions is 1 plus the square root of 3. So I'm going to start with the solution and show you the factor from the solution. So to get the factor on this, there's no fractions, so we don't have to clear that. But we do have to get everything on the left side and get 0 on this side. So you're going to subtract 1, and you're going to subtract the square root of 3 from both sides. Oop, my thing's not working too good. I'm getting messy. I'm doing it on my bed here. And my bed's a little lumpy. So if you subtract them over here, it looks a little weird, but so of course these cancel out on the right side and you get 0. Over here you have x minus 1 minus the square root of 3. And that is the factor. This whole thing is one of the factors. Okay? There's your solution right here. X equals 1 plus the square root of 3. But the factor is this. You get the factor by getting 0 on this side. So it's a big, ugly factor. Now, if you use the quadratic formula, you've probably seen, solutions like this. X equals 1 plus or minus, plus the square root of 3. All right, let's see. Dang, I'm trying to think of something, but no. Well, there might be a faster way your teacher shows you than this. I can think of one, but I think I'm going to do it the long way. I know that one's going to come out 1 minus the square root of 3 probably. But we'll go ahead and figure it out the long way. I'm trying to see. Yep, it is. All right, so we are going to use that synthetic division again. It's going to be pretty strange here. We're going to divide by 1 plus the square root of 3. This is for solution. Alright, so if I put, I'm going to go ahead and pause it here so I can get some of this stuff written down. 1 plus the square root of 3. Be right back. Okay, I got a little written down here. So we're going to divide by 1 plus the square root of 3. And of course your polynomial was what? X cubed minus 3x squared plus 2. There were no x's, so that's why you got to put a 0 between the, you've probably done this before, x squared and the 2. There's 0 x's. So you got to have that placeholder in there. So then what's the first thing you do? You bring down the 1. Then we got to multiply 1 times 1 plus the square root of 3, which is just 1 plus the square root of 3. Then to add these things, you add the number with the number and leave the square root by itself. So negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2, and then you still have plus the square root of 3. Now we've got to multiply this goofy thing times that goofy thing. So I've set it up over here. So we're going to take the 1 plus the square root of 3 times the negative 2 plus the square root of 3. So it's like FOIL. You got to take the 1 times both of them. So I'm going to take the 1 times 2 is negative 2. This might get messier. The 1 times the square root of 3 is plus the square root of 3. And now we take the square root of 3 times both of these. The square root of 3 times negative 2 is minus 2 square roots of 3. And the positive square root of 3 times the positive square root of 3 is just 3. Okay, it's like the square root of 3 squared times itself squared, and it cancels it out. And you just get 3. Another way to think of it, square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is the square root of 9, and the square root of 9 is 3. Two different ways to think about it. Now we're going to combine like terms. We can combine this number, negative 2 plus 3 makes 1. We're putting the plain old numbers without the square roots together. So that is 1. And then we got a 1 square root of 3 minus 2 square roots of 3 equals minus 1 square root of 3, or just minus the square root of 3. So that's what we get when we multiply this one times that one. So it goes up here as 1 minus the square root of 3. We add those together, we get 1 minus the square root of 3. Now you've got to multiply this times that again. Okay, another couple. You might want to pause the video and try it yourself and see if you get the same thing as me. Okay, otherwise you can just watch it. So I got 1 plus the square root of 3 times 1 minus the square root of 3. So again, we take the first thing times first. 1 times 1 is 1. Then 1 times the negative square root of 3 is minus the square root of 3. Oops, that 3 is not coming out too good, sorry. And then the square root of 3 times 1 is plus the square root of 3. And then the signs here, this is a positive square root of 3 times a negative square root of 3. So positive times a negative is a negative. And remember, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is just 3. So now these square roots of 3, we got a minus and a plus square root of 3. They cancel each other out. And we get just 1 minus 3, which is negative 2. So this is negative 2 right here. That's what we wanted, because these last 2's, if it really was a factor, should add up to 0. This is actually the remainder, right? So a remainder is 0, so that was a factor of it. Here's what we got left. This is why it gets tough. It's because we don't have a nice, easy little thing anymore. So you got this ugly thing. What does this represent? It represents x squared, and then this whole thing times x. So it's, I don't even know how to write it good, okay? But I'm going to I'll put a plus sign first, but then put all of this stuff in parentheses. Negative 2 plus the square root of 3 times x. Okay? That's the coefficient of x. And then this is the last thing. It's plus 1 minus the square root of 3. Pretty ugly. Now, of course, I wouldn't have the first idea how to factor that. So something like that, we got to use the quadratic formula. I hope you've used that before. It looks like this. First of all, the number in front of x squared, which in this case is a 1, is the a number in the formula. So we know a equals 1. B is the coefficient of x. Well, it's pretty ugly. It is this whole thing. So the b is negative 2 plus the square root of 3. Boy, if your teacher has an easier way, you're going to luck out, but this is one way. I can't think of another way right now. And then the c number is the number without an x in it, and so it's all of this. It's not just one number. It's an ugly thing too, like everything else in this problem. So we have 1 minus the square root of 3. Now, to remind you, I'll pause it for a second while I write the quadratic formula. I think I'm going to chop this into a couple of videos, so in a minute we'll come back and talk about the quadratic formula and how to solve it. Okay, this will be part 1, and the next part of part 2 we'll finish this up or get most of it done.